All right, hi everybody. Welcome to Based with Nixops. I am joined today with my good friend Alex Sankoff. We are here going to talk about software and various other things, but me and Alex first met in 2018 at ETH Classic Labs discussion on consensus protocols. And yeah, thank you for coming on the show today. And go ahead and introduce yourself so people are aware of who you are and what you do.
Hey, can you see me okay on your end?
Oh, yeah, everything's good
Video
online.
feed working?
Yep.
Awesome. So, just to give everyone a little bit of background about me, I'm a software engineer. I work for Bloomberg, which is a really big company. A lot of people know them for the news that they do, Bloomberg News. But actually, like the majority of the company works on this thing called the Bloomberg Terminal, which is this like very special tool, like a custom like a custom software package, like physical computer that allows you to interact with like the stock market, and it has its own like IP protocols. It all has its own sort of system of um, decentralized system of different data centers. Uh, so that's basically where I'm at right now. But before that, for about like 4 years, I worked professionally in like the cryptocurrency space. So I worked at ItBit, which is like one of the biggest exchanges, at a really OG exchange. I don't know if you know that one, Nixops.
I do. I know most of the
You know
exchanges.
ItBit?
Yeah, I never used it, but I know of it.
Yeah, so ItBit, and then and basically a variety of contracts, and I did a lot of open source development as well for the Ethereum Classic community too. So kind of dealing with those 51% attacks, and you know, there's a large group of people that want to change the hashing algorithm on ETC from Ethash to Ketchup 256, also known as SHA-3. So I was really active in that. So yeah, that's kind of, I would say, like a professional resume of what I've been doing
Nice.
for the past few years.
Nice. Yeah, so the Bloomberg terminals, I when I used to work at Forexes and build them and things like that, we had a couple of the traders that, we were directly involved with. And my familiarity with the Bloomberg terminal is basically we weren't really allowed to touch them. A friend of mine has one at home. I don't know how that game came about, but he does have one. He can't use it at home, but he has it. And like the Bloomberg terminal keyboards and everything's all unique. It's all interesting.
Let me actually get it. So I have a keyboard to show you.
Awesome. Hi, Cortic. Anyone that's just joined, Alex is going to go get us a Bloomberg terminal keyboard so you can see what they look like. Most people have never actually seen one in person. Um, yes.
Can you see it? Do you see the dots at the top? Can
Yes.
you read them?
Yes, we can read them. Video quality's kind of shit. Let me guess, you're on a MacBook Pro, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, same here. 720p all day, baby. Even though they're like $10,000 machines, $5,000 machines, still a 720.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a funny. I have a funny story about this. This is not a real Bloomberg official keyboard. This is something that so I work for them. I do programming. I don't really need the general keyboard with like all the buttons, because there's generally a lot more buttons than just
Yes,
these.
I've seen them.
So what I did was I took a well-known like Japanese Cherry MX brown like programming like office keyboard, which is this black base, and then I went onto eBay and I found the keycaps on eBay, and I just attached them to the top. Now they're totally functional.
Yeah.
When I have the Bloomberg application open, it actually, you can type in equity or municipal bonds or mortgages and stuff like that, and it'll work.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's what the company. This is to me so fascinating, because it's really like the company started in 1981, and they originally were making their own operating systems as well. And they were one of the first people to create a chat network, this thing called IB Chat, Instant Bloomberg.
Yep.
They like started a chat application in like 1988 or something like that, which really like revolutionized because you can reach out to any other user of the system. Like no matter who it is, as long as they're a paying terminal subscriber, you can contact them from another terminal and just send them a message. So
Nice. Yeah, I mean, my
yeah.
familiarity with Bloomberg was like when I was doing forexes and doing development for them, and a lot of people are like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, yeah, we were building the exchanges that were being used for like equity trades and liquidity for currencies, things like that. Um, a lot of people don't understand just how intricate all of that is. There's just quite a bit that goes on, and what
Oh
happens
yeah.
is that people fail to understand that like there's an entire world of finance bro software that most people on cringe Twitter don't even know exists. Like there's an entire
Yes.
like there's an entire sub network of softwares and tools and proprietary stuff that people have no idea what it is, but it's like this it's trillions of dollar industry in and of itself that unless you're privy to it, you really don't know that it even exists. And then like when people find out about it, they're like, "What? There's a terminal? There's this?" And you're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah. There's like actually an entire ecosystem of tools and software that they publish and release on their own that the public never even hears about."
Absolutely. I think that that's actually something that's so interesting about cryptocurrency in general is that it's made it like mainstream. Like how many, like 14-year-old kids know how to read like a candlestick chart now and are talking about like perpetual futures and stuff like that. And they're like 14. And I think it's all because of crypto.
It is, but
Have
it's
you
so
noticed
weird.
that?
Yeah, it's so weird
Yeah.
because like you're like these kids, but then like when you ask them about traditional finance markets and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. You're like, hey,
They have no idea, but they're moving over
yeah,
because like people have discovered, hey, I'll tell you why a lot of people are starting to like do it because in the past, like when Bitcoin was really getting started, it cost like $8 a trade to place a trade on something like E-Trade or Charles Schwab.
yep,
Nowadays, it's free to
yep.
place a trade. And that was one of the huge innovations that the crypto space brought was this notion of like, yeah, it's free to place a trade. Or I guess if you're using one of the perpetual, like a MEX or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, but Max is already in a bunch of heat now. I mean, Arthur stepped down as the CEO. There's been a shakeup, CFTC charges. I mean, there's a lot going on with that, and like
I consider Arthur Hayes to just be like one of the most successful black entrepreneurs of all time.
really
Like,
he is, and he's a
yeah,
nice guy
it,
in person. He really is. Like
yeah,
he's a really cool guy, but so much went on. But you know what else is funny is the fact that like
yeah.
along with the trouble that BitMEX is in, Tether has magically stopped printing. Like Tether has not been
Interesting.
printing any new tethers, which Caspian C and some other people have pointed out. They're like, well, BitMEX isn't even doing any good. There's like very low volume now, and then all of a sudden, um, there's no new tethers being minted. Whereas before there was like millions of dollars of tether being printed every week.
To me, like it's been so clear all along that everything, BitMEX, Bitfinex, all of these weird like Asian exchanges that like popped out of nowhere, like KuCoin, like those type of ones.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't process actual currency, like they don't have legit bank accounts and stuff like that, in my opinion, think that they're just a ticking time bomb.
Oh yeah.
Because like at least with the ones like you take a Coinbase or a Kraken or like a Bitflyer in Japan or like the legit ones, Gemini, they have like a real presence and that you're not going to like the page isn't going to disappear. So that's always been my belief. I wasn't surprised when BitMEX got now that they're in this position.
Yeah, it wasn't either. I mean, matter of fact, me and friends had been talking about it was only a matter of time before it was going to happen. Even though we loved BitMEX, by the way, but
Yeah,
like shitmex gambling was like the way.
100x leverage for everyone.
100x leverage, burning Mex accounts was just a way of life for some people. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the thing that became clear that something was going to happen is once they started with the KYC push, right? Like as soon as that was clear in August. Like the writing was on the wall that something was going to happen. Because
Yeah.
for years, nothing. It was just you needed to use a VPN or access it through, being physically in another country. Hint, hint, wink, wink, whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're going to KYC. We're going to do all this. And yeah, then that was kind of like the writing on the wall that it was all going to be over.
I mean, my thing is this, is that if I'm going to be KYC'd by some company, I would rather it be like a legit company than like a weird company like BitMEX, because I don't know what they're going to do with that data. Like, I don't know what they're going to do with my identification. Can they use that for like, what if they get hacked or that kind of thing? So I'm the type of guy that the second they put that KYC in there, I would have been gone. Not that I've ever used it. I see the same thing starting in the DeFi space. Going to these websites, some of them ask you for like an email address before you use a DeFi app. And it's like, no, I'm not going to use you. I'm not giving you my email address. That's not how we do it.
It's bad enough that MetaMask already captures that data, or that it could capture that data anyway because of the browser plugin, right? Because most people are and I'm going to say this, and I know all you privacy nerds are going to get really upset, but basically, you guys that are using Chrome signed into your Gmail and doing all these Uniswap things, literally Google knows that you're doing it. Just so you know, you're not really hiding. And you're not really, even if you're in incognito, they're still aware of it because incognito or private mode is literally, what it is. Like, you can claim whatever you want, but there's a reason that there's still cookies and things like that that are still being transmitted to and from Google and things like that. And
absolutely.
So yeah, and Shitcoin Sherpa said that Coinbase is selling our KYC data to ISIS. That may be, but
to ISIS.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that letter that Brian Armstrong sent around?
Oh,
and 5% of the employees have quit.
Dude, okay, here's the way I feel about that, okay? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. In financial software, actually in software in general, there's enough politics when you start talking about architecture and how things are being done and expedients and deliverables and stuff like that. Keep the actual politics of the world out of the shit. Like, that's just the way I feel about it. How about you?
I sort of have mixed feelings. Like, to me, I think that if I didn't want to talk about politics, then I wouldn't talk about it myself. But I guess what rubbed me a little bit the wrong way with the letter is sort of telling people not to talk about something. And I totally agree with you. Like, if I had a colleague that kept repeatedly talking about politics, like, that would be an issue. But I would bring that up with my manager and I would just say, this is unprofessional because I can't, work. But I wouldn't put a chilling effect on all discussion by saying it's not allowed. That's kind of like one side. Although the other side is I completely agree with you in that keep that shit out of work. Like,
There's enough politics in software. Like, literally, how many times have you been in a heated discussion over just simple architecture or like, how an API is going to be set up, the data models, those kind of things. Like, those right there are enough to cause huge fights and arguments in between teams. Like, now all of a sudden you're going to bring the political turmoil of the outside world in? Yeah, it's not going to bode well. Like, it's a ticking time bomb as it is. Now you're going to bring in more shit? Yeah, not going to go well. Not looking good.
Yeah, and I bet you it's so much there are cases of just like, you don't want one employee talking on behalf of another employee because that can cause problems in its own right.
Yep.
Like, so I absolutely see what you're saying. Although that being said, when I was in my senior year of college, I worked in Google and doing an internship in the Google data center. And we were doing a lot of stuff. And I remembered those guys there talked about politics for hours.
Oh,
Googlers, there's one thing Googlers like to do. They like to argue and discuss. So they would talk about politics for hours. I'm not kidding.
Oh, I know. I mean, like I said, when I was in the Valley, which, I just moved in December of last year, like, everybody in the Valley wanted to talk about all this shit. I'm just like, when I go to work, Last thing I want to do is
Uh-huh.
talk about politics, like, because there's already enough politics and architecture and design and all of this. Like,
Absolutely.
last thing I want to do is deal with this shit, you know, and like the
Absolutely. I agree.
and people say, well, dude, like you just like that doesn't come off as being like inviting, and it's like, look, I don't go to work to like be chummy. Like, sure, I make friends and stuff, and we do stuff outside of work, and we can talk and have those conversations there. But like when it comes to like being at work, I want to get
Mhm.
what I need to get done because if first of all, if I'm in the office, I'm already
Uh-huh.
begrudgingly there, so I just want to get it done so I can go on about my normal day of doing something else. You know what I mean? I know that sounds
So
terrible,
I'm
but
going to
yeah.
chalk you up. Yeah, do you believe in live to work or work to live?
I believe in the idea that we work to live in the sense that like
Uh-huh.
you go to work, you get paid or you get paid somehow and
Mhm.
like that's your goal is to like not be married to the job so to speak when you're working for someone else. Like
Absolutely.
when you're working for someone else that's not necessarily the case or shouldn't be the case. But like if you're doing your own thing, like and you're running your own company, like you're pretty much married to that. Like and anyone who says they're not is lying because you pretty
Mm.
much have to be passionate about it. You have to want it to
Mm.
succeed or it's going to fail.
Mhm. Absolutely. That's such a nuanced way of putting it.
Well, I mean,
Have we been talking for 17 minutes?
yeah,
Or
it
have we
doesn't
been?
feel like
Okay,
it.
cool.
But yeah,
Dude, we.
so the other thing is like I wanted to get into talking about some of the things we were talking about like a few minutes before the show started, and it
Yeah.
seems to be a big thing now is the people talking about Square. Okay, like today, and you made a good
Mhm.
point that it's great. Square, bought some Bitcoin. That's cool, but
Square bought 50, I think, was it 50 million or 450 million? I think it's
50, yeah,
$50 million.
MicroStrategy, the other company that for some reason people
Uh-huh.
are now heralding as some kind of great company whose stock price went up really high in the early 2000s and then has flat like just stayed the same. They bought
Uh-huh.
450 million and people are like these are great companies and like I get Square maybe but like MicroStrategy hasn't really done anything so like
MicroStrategy's a junker. Like
yeah
I looked at them. Basically, what they do is they squat on domain names and they
correct
sell them. It's like, dude, what a shit business. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Have you heard about JFrog going public? Just by the way,
oh yeah
they're the ones that
JFrog the
make
Artifactory
Artifactory.
yeah I know I used to use Artifactory all the time because as a Java dev for years, Artifactory was
Yeah,
really and also if you're an Android developer,
yeah.
Artifactory is really good if you're
If
in a big team for sure.
if you do professional software, you will come across Artifactory everywhere.
Yeah.
I think it's met in every job since I graduated from college. There's been some instance of Artifactory running. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, and I like JFrog. Like
Yeah.
the people there, when I have a great relationship with them for about 5 years. We used to have pretty much monthly calls. I went to a couple of their events they had in Napa Valley. Really great group of people. And they do really good work. But yeah, going back to Square, Square
Yeah.
is a software as a service. They just happen to be in financials, and people have it in their head. Like, and I've been seeing like Bashko and people talking to run Bitcoin nodes
Mhm.
locally. All right, first of all, I'll say this much: if your shit's in the cloud, you already have team and training for that. Like, there's a difference between having an operations engineer and a DevOps and a systems engine and a systems admin engineer who work in cloud-based services versus on site or on prem. Like
Yeah.
they're different disciplines because one's going to understand power consumption, one's not. One's going to understand what a mezzanine is in a blade server, and the other one has no fucking idea about it because they don't deal with it. And
The people, yeah, I would say also that the people in crypto that really have those skills are the people in mining.
yeah,
That is actually legit data center
yes,
design. And like heat, and you're dealing with the electricity, and you're dealing with like switches and networking and that kind of stuff. But I completely agree with you. I don't think that Square, I don't even think, let me give you a little secret. A lot of exchanges use AWS
Yeah.
entirely.
A
I
lot
would
of
say most
startups.
exchanges use AWS.
I mean, most startups, most companies in software as a service, or they provide some type of, they rely on AWS, Azure,
Yeah.
GCP, or insert some cloud company here because infrastructure costs money, and people don't realize that. Like the bandwidth you need at scale costs a lot more than some companies make in a month, and that's why they use cloud hosted services.
Oh yeah, and I would say too that I work at one of the few companies that actually runs its own data center, which is like Bloomberg. We run multiple data centers
And you
that
have
are
an
just like
MPLS
entirely just our
circuits.
servers.
Yep, you have MPLS
And
circuits and
it
site to
is,
sites. Yeah.
oh yeah, BGP, we have AS zones, we've got like, data halls and like huge network storage appliances. The size that you need to be in order to consider even making one of those and building one of those up from the ground up, you need to be massive. There is no just like I woke up one morning and I built a data center. No, you need to, it takes like years to plan for. So yeah, most of these exchanges definitely don't run their own data centers.
And
I can
most
guarantee it.
and most startups in today's world are using AWS or some cloud service because they're
Mhm.
it's just easier to start up, build the service, or build whatever you're doing, and then start making money off of it. Versus it is like planning. Hey, we're going to do on-prem. Not only are you going to need a huge amount of capital, a lot of investors aren't fans of that model anymore because it's not provable that they're going to be profitable within the first few years of starting up these data centers.
No, now, let me say this. I absolutely do sympathize, though, with the people that are trying to do on-prem stuff. And I really do believe that we're going to start seeing these like $10,000 servers.
Yeah.
Or, like where it's basically you got the switch in the box, you've got a lot of storage, you've got that. The question is, where can you go to hook it up to that high bandwidth? That I think is really where where you have to do the big data centers. Because you can't just set one of these things up at home.
Well, I mean, you can if you got the power for it. And actually, Cortec had to ask AWS equals Amazon Web Service for cloud computing. Yes, that's what we're talking about. We should have been a little more specific there. But yeah, when it comes down to it, like, and I'm gonna say this, and a lot of people are gonna laugh, but like there are cycles, right? We went from mainframe and terminal usage to then we went to like this big movement to on-prem. Now we're doing the basically big data center terminal usage where cloud computing brings the mainframe idealism with the small in-house terminals or on your device, that kind of thing. And like you said, we're going to go back to these big servers. But the other thing is like having worked in large
I'm thinking microservers.
Yeah.
I'm thinking my honest opinion for the future is microservers, where it's like I have a Raspberry Pi hooked up to like a 5 terabyte drive, and that's hosting a local social network for, let's say, people in like a 1 mile radius, where they can connect to like a radio signal or something.
Yeah.
Like that's where I hope things will go. And it's not in the hands of just like fucking Facebook or Google or those big companies. As much as I love them, I really do like the big tech companies for what they've been able to make and produce. But I think it's unhealthy the amount of control that they can have.
Oh yeah, I mean for sure. Like that's one of the biggest fears I have. Like one of the things is like I'm mainly active on Twitter and Mastodon, and people are like, why don't you use Facebook? And I'm like, well, 8 years ago I stopped using Facebook, and then they're like, what'd you do? I'm like, I deleted my account, and then a couple of months later they changed their policies on data retention and stuff like that. So I'm glad I got out when I did. But these companies make it presentable as like they're a platform. And that word is so fucking nefarious for them to use. Because it's not really a platform because you control nothing. You're literally giving them data. You get a little bit of control on how it's presented, but that's about it.
So this is the scam that Facebook is running right now. And I finally was able to put my finger on it. On the one hand, they present themselves as a social network, which is like this tool for anybody in the world to connect to it and be able to join and contribute content, and whoa, it's new and all this stuff. And then basically when people go after them and they say like, oh, why are you allowing like X on your platform? Like, bots, or you look at like potentially, terroristic stuff or something like that. When people go to them, they'll be like, hey guys, we're not going to take that down because we're a publisher and we publish original ideas and we're like basically helping people become writers. But if you look at the reality for how they actually treat the individuals on there, I've been deplatformed on multiple of these platforms. Medium.com, they took down my articles. I've had videos yanked off of YouTube, all this kind of stuff. So the big companies treat the actual creators on there like shit. Yet they claim like they're these defenders of, truth and free speech and all that stuff.
The only thing they're defending is called profits. And like that's something that a lot of people don't really get, is that like anytime you're the product, it never ends well for you, right? Like most people have in their heads, they're like, oh, it's a platform, it's where I can put my stuff. No, literally they're monetizing off of you by ads and then collecting the data off people who enjoy your content in order to distribute them more ads, so that they have these people who are paying for those ads to be able to be displayed. And like, there's a lot of this misunderstanding of like, oh, well, like these companies are doing greater goods, but in reality, it may have started that way with the intention, but the reality is people got to make money. And so finances and monetization.
Not just make money, just keep growing.
Yeah.
They need to keep expanding their monetary. That's the scary part about them. It's like they can't just stop. They can't be like, all right, we're taking enough data from people, we're extracting enough. No, they need to keep doing more, because that's what's expected of them, to keep growing year over year. And I'm thinking about like, and they're all sort of on a scale. Like I actually think Google is pretty good because I pay them. I pay $3 a month for Google Drive. They're a legit company. I've used Google Compute. Google Search is amazing. I think that Facebook, in my opinion, is just truly the worst. Like they are actually, my least favorite.
Yeah, I mean, you can use those services. Like I tell people all the time, like, if you're reliant on G Drive or you're reliant on like iCloud or something like that, at least use GPG on your files so you can encrypt them. And then, at least there's some kind of level of security there, even if, they decide to cough up your data, at least you're protected. Like everything of mine that goes to my iCloud, because I use Apple's iCloud for storage, for some of my home devices and stuff like that. Everything is GPG. Everything's
encrypted. How is it, by the way? How is it?
I've had zero issues. Like, I'm not a huge fan of trusting someone, so I encrypt it before it goes, and that's just what I do. And, but then again, I also am in an Apple ecosystem for requirements and things like that I've had to support. And I'm finally glad to be getting out of that. But at the same time, I've been waiting on a company like Proton Mail is supposed to be releasing a Proton Drive. I've been beta testing their calendar stuff. But I also like hosting my own. So like, I have cloud storage of my own that I use. And, SCP, and ain't nobody got access to it but me. And, it sits in a bulletproof host in Finland, or not Finland, sorry, in Iceland. And, I keep a couple of 100 gigs of data there, and people are like, well, what do you keep there? I keep important photos. I keep important documents, things like that, that are all tied to my Deadman switch. And that's something that I do.
Well, I think that it's all a matter of, you have to adopt that mentality that my data is important.
Yeah.
My data is worth something. I think like we see that, but I feel like a lot of people just don't even have that. They haven't even come up with that as a concept. To them, they don't see anything about like, all right, well, putting all my family photos on Facebook, what can be weird about that? What can go wrong? Especially if they're in the developing world.
Yeah.
Like someone who's just come into contact with a phone with the internet on it, how are they going to know don't put all your family photos on Facebook?
Yeah. I mean, same thing with children growing up today, though. Like that's the other problem, right? Like our society It's literally like now you see 6 and 7 year olds who have their own Facebook accounts and TikToks, and their parents are just like okay with them having that as their babysitter and interaction mode. And like I
Yeah.
find that to be appalling because like when I was
Hmm.
7 and 8, we were outside playing on bikes and breaking shit. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, it's I think that like we have that view because we work with computers as tools and we
yeah,
understand like computers as tools, and it's kind of like they're great, but not the healthiest. You need balance. Um, I think it's really interesting to think about. The one project I'm most interested in right now, and I'm trying to do more with it, is Urbit. Are you familiar with Urbit at all?
yeah, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't used it myself. And like
Uh,
I've been again, I there's only so many hours in the day.
exactly. Well, you're doing work with Tor and stuff like that,
Yeah,
so you're working on your own thing. But I'm personally very interested in local scale computing and this idea of like I had this idea for hear me out. This was my idea for a dating app that I wanted to build.
okay.
It's basically every day you get sent a message by the app with sort of like a prompt on it, and basically that prompt you can choose to answer it, you can choose to write down an answer, and then that gets put on your profile, and then you would go to bars. So that's stored locally on your phone. That never reaches the cloud or anything like that. You would be able to go locally to bars and stuff, and they would have their own Wi-Fi hotspot, and you would be able to connect with other local people in the bars, and they could read your content when they
Hmm.
were at the bar or around it, or when they went there at some point. Everyone would be stored. So this idea of basically like these intimate details to people's lives that they would feel very sort of like uncomfortable giving to Facebook. Maybe people might feel more comfortable and more trusting if they had total control of their data.
Yeah, but there's
You know?
only the problem is like total control of the data. Then from a valley perspective, let's
Yeah.
legitimately put it where it is. All right, from an investment standpoint, investors care about monetization, right? Like how they
Yeah.
look at it is that cool. You can bootstrap it just like even the Cypherpunk Labs. Like, hey, how are you monetizing your data? Well, we don't have any. What do you mean? Like, oh, you don't have data? No. Like, well, what's your plan to monetize data? Like, how are you going to start getting data? It's like we're not. And then they're like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. So every Valley investor, that's the first thing they ask now is like, what are you doing with your data? How are you monetizing it? And have you thought about looking at?
I'm listening to you. I'm
Yeah,
grabbing a beer,
yeah, no
but I'm
worries.
listening to you.
But yeah, everybody in the Valley wants to like monetize data, and that's how the investment scene is right now for everything. Whether you're looking at this dating app or anything else. Um,
Hmm.
we're talking about everybody wants to know how you're going to monetize the data, and like that's the money. It's not. It's no longer unless you're getting monetized by people paying to use your service. Realistically,
Uh-huh.
everybody just
Yeah,
wants
I
to know how
think
you're
that
treating the data.
I think that the paying is the most ethical way in the future. So like I used to have this belief that like, oh, if we were having to pay for everything, it would be like this dystopia where we would like, be like charged for like a squeeze of toothpaste. And like I always found that really scary. But like now when I think about like content on the internet and I think about like I know artists and I know people that are like creators and I know professional YouTubers and all these people, and it's like these people need like a real way to get paid beyond just we're gonna mine the viewers' data with ads.
Yeah.
You know, they need other monetization routes. Patreon is huge. Someone needs to make a good crypto Patreon for
Well,
real.
so the problem with crypto and payment models, right? Like, and I could say this because literally we talked about this not too long ago on the phone.
Yeah.
The subscription model doesn't pan out well, and the reason why it doesn't is because like in the banking system, you can do pre-auths and you can do PayPal pre-auth, all this other stuff. In crypto, there's no way of doing that. Even if you were to try to like implement multi-sig and all this stuff, it ends up becoming a nightmare because of the way
Yeah.
that all of that works and the way that and it's ultimately innate to how that system's set up, which is you, the spender, decide when you spend, not when the payee decides to request the money.
Well, that's why I think that it's great being able to pay for content with
Yes,
crypto.
agreed.
So it's like I can like there's a YouTube video and I pay 10 cents and I know that that 10 cents will go to, let's say, the artist who made that song
Yeah.
or something like that. I mean, that's great. That, in my opinion, that helps artists and
Yeah.
helps people that are not giant Google, or because those are who win when it's just ads. It's
Yeah.
not the little. It's not like the little artist.
No, it's never
Yeah.
the little artist. No, and I agree. Like I support, the Patreon movement. I support people who who want to be, who are doing this stuff as their job. It sucks that platforms have really jaded us on the idea of how it should be done. And the worst part is that like you take somebody who's getting, 100,000 plus views, they're having to monetize both with Google Ads, with in video promotion, plus reliant
Yes.
on whether or not someone's willing to give them any money just to pay their bills. And then if they got outside investors for the branding, you know what I'm saying? Like it becomes this whole ordeal. And I feel that shouldn't have to be done. Like I think that there's a lot of room for improvement on that. And I think that that's going to come with time, but I don't necessarily think that
lead to like. I think it'll lead to like really like quality stuff too, because I noticed that a lot of creators now are trying to game the attention economy. They're basically like, I need to start doing like these videos of like this type of length and that type of thing because that will drive more ad dollars.
Yep.
When maybe they're looking to monetize in a way that's different than driving more ad dollars. But the algos that prioritize them prioritize ad dollars.
Yeah, because that's what matters.
That leads
to the
to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. But like you take, for example, people who are mindlessly watching YouTube, and some of the people who might end up stumbling on this video 3 weeks down the road or something like that, right? Like they're just they're just watching and they have no idea, in some cases why the algo picked it for their autoplay, that kind of stuff, but like it goes back to what you said, it becomes, based on whether or not they can show as many ads stuffed in there, and like that's been one of the things even for this show was like, we have a Patreon, because I want to keep it ad free and in video ad free too, because literally I find it very hypocritical that like I couldn't be shilling KYC services on a show that we literally talk about anti-KYC and stuff, like it would, I would look like a Bitcoin maxi at that point, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I want to actually, I'm curious. You're a guy that I really, trust a lot, and I feel like you're just such an OG in the crypto space. What do you think is going on in the crypto Twitter? I would say I've blocked a ton of maximalists of all, like Bashco, like all those guys, Safe Theme. They are no longer in my consciousness at all. And I have discovered like those guys make crypto hell. They like make it so like stressful.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't have to be that stressful. It should just be fun, like we're just doing cutting edge stuff with computers, like fun stuff, but not, like psychological. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, it became it became cultism. I mean, like all of those people you mentioned, I think except Bashco, which he probably blocks me now. I'll find out in a minute. Actually, I'll check right now. But yeah, like
no, I didn't mean Bashco, by the way. I meant another guy. I was thinking about like that guy that does the girl as the avatar, and he's like, "It's just Twitter, bro," or something like that.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah. But a lot of people block me on Twitter, and I find it hilarious because there is a small subset of them who have alt accounts that follow me. Which, by the way, if you're watching, Which, by the way, if you're watching, I know about them. So there's that. And also, just because you think you're clever, doesn't mean that I don't have my own little network of autists who report back to me that, who you are, things like this, because we get that. And the thing is it's funny because like it's unsolicited to me because I could care less about these people, but like what they do is so you take someone who's not into crypto or not super into the technology or doesn't understand anything about it, right? What the first thing they're going to do is they see these big accounts and they see all these people who say, "Oh, you should follow them." Okay, well, let's get into it.
Well, they come up in the suggested. Seriously,
Yeah.
they do. Like they just keep coming up in the suggested. You have to consciously choose to not follow them.
Yeah. And basically, Diverter said the person when you were talking about is Stop and Decrypt. That's the person's account you were talking about. Now I will say this much.
Very toxic.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
a
that
nasty
person, that person got mad at me and Carbon and some other people. Every time we throw shade about certain stuff, but I will say he did say something recently that was out of line, and I called him out on it. He apologized to me and to the people, and then like deleted the tweets because it was about someone who had passed away. I forgot who it was. I think it was not Angelou, but someone who had passed, and like he kind of like sucked it up there, but like for the most part, most of the maximalists are nothing more than t-shirt peddlers who are basically what we now refer to as the 401k Bitcoiners who think that Bitcoin is going to like do really well as a 401k platform, but then they also believe in Austrian economics. So like I've been using the phrase Austrian economic theorist. So if you've ever watched the show Ancient Aliens, right? They talk about the ancient astronaut theory, right? So I just refer to it as the Austrian economic theorist. It's like kind of like a kick.
Well, is the Austrian economics basically just like anarcho-capitalism? It's like we need no government at all. The market will just magically appear perfect.
Yeah, but the problem is with that theory is that all of those pushing that also subscribe to KYC AML services to stack sats. So you're an anarcho crypto.
Exactly. You got to be consistent.
Yeah.
I completely. That is actually the one thing that I love about the. I do have to say, like the BCH community. They really are the real anarcho-capitalists. And I disagree like shit. Like I've met Roger Ver.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Roger, I do not see eye to eye with you with your opinion on like government and that kind of thing. But I like that you are, big on Bitcoin. And I think actually, I don't know if you noticed, I got an update for the Bitcoin.com wallet on my phone. I use it. Great Bitcoin wallet. It now says buy Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. He says Bitcoin first now.
Nice.
So I think Roger Ver is, I think he just completely is done. Like he doesn't want to fight anymore. Or like.
Well, I mean, like the thing is Ver
he just wants to support Bitcoin.
Ver did a lot early on in Bitcoin. And then he kind of lost his way with like, buying into the Craig Wright stuff, all that jazz.
Did he buy into it?
Well, I mean, he promoted him as, and supported him up until a certain point, and then he signed transactions saying that he was a fraud. The thing is how I look at all of this, right? All the people on Twitter, all the drama, everything, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I love a technical conversation. Get me on a technical debate on Twitter. Love it. Get me on a technical debate with somebody who's capable, though. These idiots, and I'll name some of them, Mr. Hoddle, what's the other one? Psychedelic Bart, all these other ones. Yeah, so their t-shirt.
Psychedelic Bardo.
Yeah. So they sell t-shirts.
Each other.
They sell a t-shirt. They sell a magazine. Meanwhile, they're going to come in and start talking about, shit coins this, shit coin that. Meanwhile, you ask them a technical question about like block structure and understanding like transaction sizing, message data. Ask them about confirmations. How would you call an RPC? Like, how would you set up an API for that? Would you use a wrapper or would you allow someone to call your RPC native? What would you do? And they're lost. But meanwhile, they're like, Bitcoin's the best. And the shit I just went over right there are very basic principles of Bitcoin. We're not even talking about super technical stuff. We're actually just talking about like what most use cases would be for developers and people interested remotely in Bitcoin on their platform. And like all they want to do is like, you're just a shitcoiner. You're just a shitcoiner. Well, I got news for you, kids. Satoshi was a shitcoiner too, everybody was a shit corner because it was always iteration. Software improves iteratively, by the way. It
Absolutely.
has to. And if you don't believe me, the TCP/IP stack that you're using to watch this right now, while you're about to go shitpost on Twitter to me, literally has iteratively improved over the decades. Because had it not, it wouldn't be able to support the
Well,
payloads that we're
this is
doing
what I
now.
don't get. There, all right, so this is what I never got, and what kind of like really like frustrated me is, in my opinion, like the fascination with soft forks. All
Yeah.
right, I hate soft forks because I took Jimmy Song's class. He taught a boot camp, and an amazing boot camp. And the reason why I took it was because he worked at ItBit as well.
Yeah.
So he taught this part of working there, and he explained very in depth as to what a soft fork is. And what it is basically you're taking the code and you're attaching sort of like more code into it, and
Yep.
then so that way it can cut over without removing. That means that you start getting these massive code bases of just code stacked upon code that is no longer even being used.
Yep.
And in practice, it's just really messy. Well, with a hard fork, Bitcoin hard forked in the days of Satoshi.
Yep.
Satoshi did hard forks. He says, yeah, you got to update. You want to be on Bitcoin? Download Bitcoin 2.0. It's a new software package that you have to do. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, the soft fork was the one thing that killed me. And the people arguing for it, like I know, like Safety, for example, like he's arguing hard forks versus soft forks. I'm like, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, you've never written a line of code. You don't know how bad a soft fork idea is. Like, it's a bad idea.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But Safety and Pierre Richard and all those guys, and even like Samson Mao and others, like the problem is that they've cultivated this echo chamber, right? And now that Twitter has given them the ability to limit who can respond, it's getting worse. But now here's where it gets funny. Here's where it gets hilarious.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they want to subtweet you, like somebody like me, and then it gets back to you that they're subtweeting something you said, and then it's like hilarious because they're obviously following people who are much more technical than they are, but then they want to sit there and throw shade about anything because you support alternative technologies. Well, yes, the fuck I do. Even Finney, and Satoshi both said that consensus should be explored. Proof of work wasn't going to be scalable forever. There needed to be other options. People are like, privacy is important. That's why I'm a fan of Monero.
Well, it's just kind of like, all right, let's say you're someone who's like a Ford person. You don't go around basically saying that like Chevy is like a scam or is like a bullshit car. You would not go to someone at work and be like, fuck you and your fucking Chevy. It's just like, but at the same time, it's totally acceptable. Same thing with like databases. You would never go to somebody and be like, oh, you're running like MySQL, you fucking moron. But like, it's totally acceptable to do that.
Bro, 9i or bust. 9i or bust. Yeah, like I've said that before. I make fun of them because I'm like, where's my Apache maximalist, right? Like where's my Apache maximalist? Where's my Nginx maximalist? Where's my light HTTPD maximalist, right? Where my homies at? And people are like, why do you say that? And I'm like, literally, that's the same fucking concept. And so like, let's also get real about this. And we were talking about this before the show started. Literally everybody outside of crypto feels the same way when they see this. They're like, why is there this cultism over one piece of software that ultimately has a whole bunch of technical debt to it? And then by modern software standards, you would have to iteratively improve it to be able to make it worth using. You see what I'm saying?
And I want to say, like, I love, like, let me just say for everyone who's watching this on the stream, and just so you know, I love Bitcoin. I love cryptocurrency. I like the idea of decentralization. I love all this stuff. And I'm no longer in professional crypto. I work at Bloomberg now. I used to work in professional crypto. So now I'm just another amateur armchair guy that's bitching. I love crypto. Yeah. And it's just like these guys like Samson Mao. I mean, Samson's an OG. Samson's definitely an OG. But some of these really toxic guys, that is not what crypto was like in the past.
No.
That would have been completely unacceptable to say just even a fraction of what these guys say. Like, it just so unacceptable. You look at the old like Bitcoin threads, like the old Satoshi threads, people were so nice to each other and just kind of like open-minded and like, friendly, like no one was talking shit. Like that's what we should be emulating.
Well,
I don't think Satoshi ever talked shit about anybody.
Yeah, he did. Matter of fact, that's why VOI happened. He talked shit about the hackers who told him there was a vulnerability, and he said, "Fuck you, not gonna. It's not gonna be exploitable."
Did he really?
Yeah, he did. And fucking IRC and shit. He was fucking. These guys told him, "Yo, dude, there's an exploit." He said, "Nah, dude, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna deal with this. It's not important enough." And they were like, "Okay, like." Fair warning, this is our disclosure. We told you how it was done. He's like, fuck off. And guess what? Next thing you know, VOI happens because of a faucet and not checking on the maximum outputs on a single transaction. And boom, Bitcoin hacked. And people fail to understand that. And they're like, but there's only a maximum of 21 million. Yeah, well, like, what was it? 89 billion Bitcoins were generated, all because no one cared. And
well, let me say this. Is that what is interesting about Bitcoin is that even though the software, the chain became this like 80 billion chain, the proof of work converged back on the 21 million chain. And that proof of work transcends.
Well, actually, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's not make it a fairy tale. That's not actually why it happened. It happened because everybody was calling people on the phone, screaming at people, update your peer, update your peer, update your peer, update your peer. That's how it got fixed. Because for 5 hours, Bitcoin's entire network was fucked. Like completely not usable.
Jesus.
For 5 hours, everybody was making phone calls.
Were you there? Did you?
Yeah, I was there because this was in August 2010. So it was like, this is after I'd already been in over a year. It's like people were calling people, IRC, people were text messaging, like shit was blowing up. People were like, go home and update your peers now. That's why it got fixed.
I got a taste of that with ETC's 51% attack.
Yeah.
The first one that it had. I totally know what you're talking about. It's out of the blue. It's just like, oh, everything's working fine. What the fuck?
And then boom, is broken.
Yeah, it's like, holy shit. And it's just like a straight 24 hours of just like online chatting. I'm out of most of my chat rooms, by the way. Because now that I took like a full-time job, I'm on my company's Slack. That's where I'm chatting,
Yeah, I mean, I get
I'm
that.
not in as many chat rooms,
Yeah, I mean, I get that
but
too.
I know what it's like.
Yeah. For years, like whenever I worked, on not in crypto and in crypto in my spare time, and up till the time I worked at Forexes, there was this consensus that like most of us that were early on in Bitcoin, like most people knew each other loosely. Like we knew how to contact each other. Like in 2010, it was still a very kind of small network in the sense that there wasn't hundreds of thousands of people. And it was easy to get people to update, right? Like it was very easy because like basically here's the message that went across. If you don't update, the network is fucked. Go do it now. And then people are like,
that's a hard fork.
Yeah, but
that's literally a hard fork. When you tell people you have to update your software, that's a hard fork.
Well, they pretend like everybody wants to say it's a solve for it, but like once you have a majority of consensus of the peers and the miners are, because also keep in mind, this is like, a lot of people are still self-submitting, which, by the way, a lot of people don't understand that concept, that back in the day, there was no mining pools. You submitted to your own peer, and boom, there's a lot of orphan blocks, and there's a lot of other problems. So all the peers...
That's like 2011.
Well, this is 2010, so this is August 2010. So this is also right before Satoshi leaves, because he gets a black eye from the VOI, and then literally, what is it? You got August... At the end of August.
Did Satoshi get his ego bruised?
Oh yeah, but his biggest ego bruise would be later on that year. hold on, are you ready? Because when it first gets its real use case, which was the embargo against WikiLeaks from PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, and Julian announces we're accepting Bitcoin to help donate to us. And then all of a sudden, Satoshi dips the fuck out. That's his last post about, the hornet's nest has been kicked, all these things. And a lot of people fail to understand that the reason that, like, those things happened, those weren't very long apart. You had a bruised ego from VOI. Next thing you know, you got the entire world looking at Bitcoin again, going, oh, WikiLeaks, governments, everybody's pissed off now because WikiLeaks is accepting it as a form of payment. Oh, shit.
Yeah. Well, that's when it gets interesting.
Yes.
Because that's what decentralization is. Yes. Because it was just a nerd money up until that
Correct.
time.
Correct.
Like, that was the first use case where it's like, hey, wait a second, a non-nerd can derive value from this and use this technology, which is huge. Yeah, I mean, that's so, dude, you have just like a front row ticket to like one of the biggest things.
Well, it's all there too, though. Like when I talk to people about it, they're like, yeah, but Russ Albright. No. Before the Silk Road announcements of Deep Web stuff, there was literally, this was the embargo that had made international news because WikiLeaks had released all those cables and governments were pissed and the financial institutions were blockading against them. And here you got Julian going, fuck it, we're taking Bitcoin. And then everybody's like, whoa, what? I remember that because in IRC and everything like that, people were flipping out, retro share, everything like that. People were losing their minds, man. People were losing their minds because they're like, why is this such a big deal? And it was like, because this was what it was designed for. Censorship resistant money. Like that was what it was for. And then, you have Russ take that and go on to do the Silk Road. And most people heard about Bitcoin in that context because they heard about it with the WikiLeaks thing, but most people didn't care because most people had preconceived notions about WikiLeaks based on what they thought about it, like someone leaking information and stuff like that. Some people weren't fans of that. I mean, it wouldn't really be until Snowden that a lot of these little cheerleaders, even in the Bitcoin camp today, weren't on board with a lot of this behavior. Like, and you got to keep in mind, this is years before Snowden, where you had like Bradley and everybody else leaking information. You had Anonymous working, working.
I remember watching that video, the one that Bradley Manning leaked.
Yeah.
With the helicopter.
Yeah.
And like the van. And I still remember that image in my head of like this van driving. And then it's from like, I think the cockpit of like an Apache helicopter. And they just open up on it with the machine gun. And then like somebody gets out. And then they open up on that person getting out. And I just remember seeing that. And then it turns out that those people were completely innocent. That's what the video, that's what ended up being discovered. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, in my opinion, it's crazy that person was then, thrown in jail. We could talk for an hour about it.
Yeah, I mean,
my dad. We could talk for an hour about this. It is because my dad came from Bulgaria in the 90s, claimed political asylum in the United States. He is about as freedom-loving of a guy as you can imagine.
Oh yeah,
right?
Sure.
He came from he hates Edward Snowden. He detests Edward Snowden, and he hates Julian Assange. He hates WikiLeaks. He hates all of them vehemently. And it's crazy. Like, I did not expect that from my dad because I've always been chill with it.
Yeah.
So we could chat for an hour, and I've chatted with him and got to know him more. His opinion, but.
Yeah, but like, see, here's the way I look at it, right? Like, and that goes back to what people don't understand about hacker culture either, right? So Bradley discloses to Adrian Larimore. Larimore then turns around, starts snitching on Bradley.
Lamb.
Yeah. Lamo, all that shit. It sucks he's passed. But then you have people like Sabu and them that were like, FBI informants. Like the whole thing was like a clusterfuck, right? But meanwhile, it was important because WikiLeaks has served its purpose, right? And like, I hate that Julian, and actually I'm going to say this, and a lot of people may either hate me or love me for this. If Julian gets extradited, which he is, and I hate that, I honestly hope that Trump will pardon him. And I hope that on, whether it's this election or whatever, Trump pardons Snowden too, because literally this shit needed to be known because the amount of illegal spying that our government was doing to us, the citizens here, it would be considered a war crime or an act of war if we were doing it on another country. You see what I'm saying? And our government has always denied these things, and it's ridiculous that now there's proof, and people are like, oh, well, it's great that we're exposing governments, but here's the problem, okay? Here's the flip side to that. People are letting companies do this shit without warrant, without anything, and they're letting them come in their house and get this data. And most companies don't even need a warrant for you to get that information if you're a law enforcement agency. They will just give you that shit without even a subpoena or a formal request. You can email somebody from FBI.gov, for example, and certain phone providers will give you any data you want. They don't even care. They don't even verify that you are legit FBI. Just it came from that email. So if you spoof the email, you could get information on subscribers and stuff. Sorry, you're muted, man. I can see you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
So I was going to say that I think that no matter, look at it this way. It is such a tricky question. I believe that we as American citizens have rights. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. We have fucking rights. And we have the right to not be spied on by a random person. And that's just one of these core things that this country has been built on. And to me, it's so important to preserve that, even as we move to this new digital world in which things are sort of being defined newly. We got to preserve that. And in my opinion, it's not about, I don't have anything to hide. That's the worst excuse people give. They're like, oh, I don't care if I'm spied on. I don't have anything to hide. Well, the problem with that is that it changes the way that you think. When you know that you're being watched at all times, you don't want to say something that transgresses against the person watching you. This is goes straight back to Foucault and sort of the philosophy of power. When you're being surveilled, you do not want to mess with the person surveilling you. So, to me, it's so important to preserve that.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at, for example, Amazon or Ring, right? So many people have Ring devices, and they don't even realize that in most cities, they have law enforcement agreements. So if your neighbor's got a Ring, even if you ain't got nothing to hide, they can access that Ring without a warrant and see what you're doing. Now, sure, that doesn't sound that bad, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really want my neighbor to know what, or the law enforcement to know when I cut my grass. If they want to know when I'm cutting my grass, then they need to show up when I'm cutting my grass. They don't need to be able to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's that's what people don't get, is that there is such thing as old-fashioned police work that don't require mass surveillance. It's called tracking down witnesses, going to the location, all this kind of stuff. What I'm against is sort of this mechanized, at all times, can view you at any moment, and plus getting AI involved, which who knows where that'll lead. But you know what? I wanted to actually say, do you want to open things up for questions?
Oh, yeah, sure thing.
Get some people. What do your viewers think? I'm really curious to hear their opinion.
So far, nobody's really talked about any of the surveillance stuff. But guys, ladies and gentlemen, if you are on in chat and you have a question, please ask away. Alex is going to leave here in a few minutes, so we just want to make sure that if you have questions, comments that you can ask. We could go on for hours about privacy and issues. So, yeah, if anybody's got any questions, comments, statements they want to ask, just go ahead. Keep in mind there's a little bit of a delay in the stream, so it'll take them a second before they get it, and then they can ask. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Also, the Alexa that was used in the murder trial. Right? Do you remember that? Yeah. It still sends even though it was off, right? People don't realize that. And patternistic machine learning. All right, so DJ Seafair wants to know samurai or wasabi. I know my answer. What's your answer?
Do you want what I've seen more of? I'll just say what I've seen more of professionally. And I do not have an opinion either way. I have seen Wasabi more in a professional context than I have seen Samurai.
Okay.
So, but I have not used either of them for my Bitcoin personally.
Okay. If you
But
want
I know
my,
that Samurai your favorite one? Because I know that Wasabi became dicks, or one of them became dicks.
Samurai is a bunch of dicks, like to people who talk shit about them. Here's why though. Okay, so Wasabi's CoinJoin through their coordinator does do address reuse. Matter of fact, I can send you a transaction right now that was sent to us from somebody from Wasabi at Cyberpunk Labs. What we gather was from them. We don't know for sure. We speculate because there's a correlation that this may be their alt account. We don't know.
Well, let's put it this way, Nixops. That's why I know more about Wasabi.
There's the address reuse in Wasabi is dangerously high. Whereas someone who's using Samurai Whirlpool, even though there was a FUD article that was proven to be false and the data was false, no address reuse if they use Whirlpool and Postmix correctly. Now, there have been people being arrested for Wasabi usage on the darknet. And that's the shit that matters. That's the shit that really matters. Is that if you are using mixing software and people are being arrested for using that same software, there's a high likelihood that if you are behaving the same way they are, you're probably going to get in trouble as well. And that you know, that's the like acid test, right? Like you have to really look at it that way.
Yeah. And let me just say too that like I believe, you know, it's funny because you know my background, Nixops. Like you know that you know my background. I believe everyone has a right to be able to transact anonymously. It's HTTPS. It's just in the same way that I can browse anonymously. It's just the fucking right that you have to browse to be able to transact anonymously. It's the same right people had when they had physical cash.
Yeah.
Physical cash is completely anonymous. So like this bullshit of like we need to see the exact or like we need to know exactly where it came from and that's all just like modern day stuff that has only started in like the 60s and later. Everything in cash before that never had any of that. That being said, there was a lot more corruption in the past, and that's, you know, like illegal activity when you're doing that thing. So it's such a complicated question, but I do believe deep down you have a right to transact anonymously for sure. Yeah. Because I protect that right of myself.
Yeah, I mean,
I use a Tornado Cash.
I love Tornado Cash. I'm a fan of using Whirlpool for Bitcoin when it's not my business. Now, when it's the company stuff, you know, we reuse addresses because it's easier for auditing, and we send to Coinbase or to MetalPay, and that goes back to fund the you know, for the expenses, that kind of stuff. Now, for my personal, I will use,
because you guys can claim a tax deduction, can't you?
Yeah, but
if you guys,
well, we're gonna be
we're
gonna be releasing a full on thing about taxes on this stuff once the new year starts, and we're going through all that because there's a lot of interesting stuff that most people don't know you can do. So we're going to be open sourcing our game plans on this so that people can take that and say, oh, hey, we can do this too. Here's how. Not only did we provide you resources and the laws in certain states and how you do it, that way people can also follow suit. But the thing is like we're transparent, so we don't hide anything when we reconcile to Coinbase or to MetalPay. We just don't. Now, when it comes to my personal, I use Whirlpool, and I from my personal to person transactions, and when it comes to other transactions that with more private individuals, I use Monero, and
Monero's a great technology. The only thing that I don't like about Monero is the bullshit they did with their mining algorithm, Crypto Night, and like these weird hashing algorithms they came up with.
To keep it ASIC free, buddy.
Monero, what?
Is to keep the ASICs out.
I deep down, this is what people don't get. ASICs are some of the most incredible pieces of technology that has come out of cryptocurrency. Like they are remarkable. You have the chip densities are so high compared to anything that Intel or Nvidia or any of those guys came up with. Like you're talking about like 5 nanometer ASICs.
Yep.
4 nanometer ASICs. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah, but
That
also
just
that drives innovation investments too, though, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
that's something that a lot of people also don't understand is that um, because Bitcoin is not a company, and it's because it's not a company and it's not a stock. People are looking for the investment opportunities. They're looking for ASICs hardware manufacturers because that's the mining, that's the gamification of the processes, and like that does matter.
Yes.
Yes.
The gamification, I love that. The fact that I know if I do a higher chip density and then I manufacture more of these, then I'll be able to accumulate more points than somebody else.
Yeah. Now, ASIC resistant consensus is like proof capacity and the way that Monero does theirs. They're great and novel ideas. The problem is that they also forbode interactions with hardware manufacturers. And hardware manufacturers.
I totally did. I would actually say that I disagree in that proof of capacity is ASIC resistant. I actually disagree on that.
Well, because you have to write it, so
it's
disk isn't fast enough.
Pardon me. It's CPU. It's CPU ASIC resistant. But I would, if I wanted to mine burst, I would set up a huge data center with hundreds of petabytes of storage. And I would build probably like a dedicated processor to do like the plotting of the sectors and stuff. That's what I would do if I wanted to really mine.
But you have to think about how the mining process works. You have to write it, then you read it. You read to locations. So there's actually, it has to be written out. It's like in a SHA generation, right? You're just hashing out and submitting. That's all you're doing. In this case, you have to actually write it out to a full duration. So like to the length, and then it's plotted from there, and then it's read. So that's why it's ASIC proof in the conceptual idea, because the Shabal 256 requires the written output. So like there's, so like, and IO isn't that fast yet. So like to kind of shelve that for another time, because I think we're going to be running out of time soon, because you have to go. The reality is that like ASIC resistance is great for the individual. It is not great when you start looking at overall future of execution, because big businesses, chip manufacturers and things like that, they need a place to play in that space. You have to really be honest with yourself on that, because for example, if you took away the ASICs, you think that people are going to be running as big of mining farms as they are today? No, they wouldn't be.
Bitcoin? No.
Yeah, they wouldn't. It wouldn't have existed. And yes, it's a problem because it creates this huge divergence from, telling people to go home and mine to now, like, if you want to mine, you got to buy a $3,000 piece of equipment, run a gigantic set of power use. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's problematic in the sense that it makes it difficult for like the weekend hobbyist to be able to do it. But if you're like a professional, like I'll tell you, for example, like people that work in renewable energy, I've talked with some people that work in wind in Texas. Those guys love Bitcoin ASICs because the way they look at them is they're like, I don't know anything about Bitcoin or any of that. You give me a box, I plug that box into the wall, and I feed it with my power that I know everything about, and then I get paid in Bitcoin. Like that's their bread and butter. They don't want to be thinking about GPUs and NVIDIA and building a rig and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. And that's why I'm saying like that helps in getting some of the renewable stuff, but also it helps in, people being able to forecast ROIs, understanding the ROIs, but also that in and of itself is an economy system, right? Because you have chip manufacturers who are trying to make the most concentrated that they can for these ASICs and the die size and everything like that. Meanwhile, you have an entire business structure around that, but that all applies back into the on-chain economics, which is people need to spend Bitcoin for mining fees, block rewards, and then people accumulate. Like this is an entire piece of that economic system. And so like ASICs are a preventative measure from the hobbyist. Like when I first started mining Bitcoin, you could mine that shit on anything, and you would like guarantee if you started mining the first night, whenever it was, you would have 50 by the time you woke up, at least, maybe 200, maybe 300, because remember solo self submission mining when everybody was doing that, the difficulty was 1. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody's solo submitting, and you're bound to get one because not one person was getting all of them. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the way that it was for a while. And I forget the exact time, but I just remember whenever pools started becoming a thing, and there was changes to difficulty, there was changes to the adjustments. All of these things culminated, and what
Mm-hmm.
you saw was the evolution to them being like, all right, well, CPU mining is now becoming GPU mining, and
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden some people were like, well, we're going to turn this shit into ASICs, and
Mm-hmm.
and so began the ASICs war of like what we see today. Who has the more money to get more power, more chips, more everything?
Absolutely. Well, I was gonna say, do you have any more questions from your viewers?
I do
Because I'm
not.
getting probably close.
The only thing
I'm gonna
is,
be going. Guess what? Oh
somebody
yeah.
did ask about the arrest for the wasabi, but we weren't going to get into too deep of a topic. I was just going to link them the Dread forum post on that. But I think that covers everything, man. And I want to tell you thank you for coming on, and go ahead and show some stuff you're working on and talk about some of that before we close out, and then that way everybody gets to where they can find you on Twitter, with everything like that. So
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So let me just show you guys. I'm just gonna share my screen real fast.
all right,
How do I share my screen?
Jitsi at the bottom there, bottom left. I think you just. I think Alex just left the chat. You just disconnected. That was pretty funny. That was gold. That was actually
All right.
gold.
Is my screen sharing?
Yeah, people can see it now.
Okay. So
Actually, let me put it
I
on
want to
bigger
just share.
so that people. Yeah, let me transition it to bigger so they can see your whole screen. Then there we go.
So everybody, follow me on Twitter if you're interested in hearing hacker stuff or you just want to engage with me. Like seriously, I respond to like comments and stuff on my posts and things. So I'm a I'm a software hacker, and I've been working on this application called Go Live. And the idea with Go Live is that you can go to any directory. Here, let me pull it up. You can go to any directory on any folder on your computer, and you can instantly host it as a server. So basically, you can do something. Can you see this GIF that I made here, Nixops?
Yeah, we're watching it right now. Like literally, they can see your screen as full as it can be right now.
So the idea is let's say you got some files you want to host. You can go to a server. You can basically make the files. They can be MP3 files. They can be videos, PDFs, anything, pictures, HTML, all of that. All you got to do is just run the command go live in that directory, and then immediately it's served on the internet. So, and then it's served on port 9000. You can choose which port it's served on, and you can actually use this Go utility as like a full-on web server. And that's pretty much it. I haven't done the official launch yet. I'm going to be presenting it internally at Bloomberg in our Go meetup because there's a lot of Go enthusiasts at the company. And then I'm going to do the full launch on Reddit and the Slack. I was curious if you actually had any advice for me, Nixops, or if any of your viewers do, about launching of open source software. This thing is totally free. You can download it. Go to github.com/Ansankov Go Live. It's on Homebrew. It's on Mac.
So,
Linux,
what
Windows.
license are you putting it under? MIT or GPL or what?
Apache 2.0.
Okay, cool. So basically, when you launch open source, all you really need to know is that you're going to have, especially this month called Hacktober, you're going to have a bunch of drive-by commits. What I mean by that is people are going to come to your repository looking to like change one word, change one anything. Just be mindful of that. Some of it will be useful. Some of it is going to be trash. The Linux kernel and everybody else gets hit with this every year. It just ends up being a shit show. Outside of that, the only other advice I could give you is
Hmm.
make sure that you add if people are at want to do pull requests, that you do
Hmm.
put that in your readme, like if you have a standard that you want them to follow, like if you're adding a
Uh,
feature, please add documentation for the feature. um, Make sure that you add tests, that
mm,
kind of stuff. Make sure that you require
interesting.
a test if they're adding a feature, because you need to be able to vet these people, you need to be able to vet the code, but also you need to be able to validate what's going on. So like for example, you don't want someone to add in like a where they could do like some kind of key exchange, or doing generation of like a cert or something like that without there
Yeah.
being tests and ways to verify this. Because like, yes, it's great, and yes, you may no go, but you're also a busy
Hmm.
professional, just like most people. So, are you going to spend all your time auditing this? And that's something you also need to
Uh,
do, is maybe find someone else who's going to help you moderate in the PRs
absolutely.
and that kind of thing. So, that's just some advice I would give you. And then
That's great advice.
the other thing is make sure that when people report issues, that like you also put in your README that like to actually use the GitHub issues, so that there's tracking
Hmm.
being done, and that it can be updated through there for people to actually give you feedback, instead of just like tweeting at you, hey, this is fucked, or hey, this is broke. Like, yes, open an issue.
Oh, so like something here, something wrong, open an issue, open a
Yes,
GitHub issue.
yes. And
Okay, definitely.
that way they go through with that. But then, yeah, like I said, find somebody to help you moderate the pull request, and then also make sure that you put like distinct guidelines on like, make sure there's a test, and make sure that you document the feature. So, for example, if you want to put like dynamic SSL into this, where when they start go live, it could also generate a cert, as long as they have a DNS name pointed to the IP. Then you would make sure that they include tests and include the dependent library listing, that kind of stuff, and make sure that that stuff is followed upstream, that kind of shit. Just
How would you actually implement that, by the way? Because I've only been able to do HTTP when I'm
so
doing
I mean,
local surfing.
you could actually just use certbot, and you could just make it a system
Hmm.
call, and then turn around and just have
Hmm.
the DNS pointed to the site, or pointed to the IP address where it's hosted, and then it could do the challenges and stuff as a functional call. You could actually, yeah, I mean, that would be exactly how you would do it if you want to be simple. Now you could also find a Golang library, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I see you're looking at Stack Overflow now. The world is watching you, Stack Overflow. Yes. but but like I said, that's what I would do, and like literally, don't be afraid to do that. Like a lot of people have it in their head that they got to build these fancy libraries and construct things. Look, simple is better. Okay, if there's already a process around it,
Oh yeah, simple good.
yeah. Use a Go wrapper to invoke the system command if you need to. And literally that's one way of doing it. And that, I only suggested that is because, as someone who would even remotely, like, someone who may use that, first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, it's an HTTP server. Well, how do I add SSL to it? Because first things first, SSL is like, you get your web server working. What's the next step you do? SSL. So like for me, looking at Go Live, first thing I would do, pull request it at SSL. That's what I would do. And so like looking at that, I would make sure that there's a test, validation of the process, include any information, how the upstream is going to be maintained, all of those kind of things. I would make that a requirement for the pull request. And I would have have someone help you moderate the pull request, because like I said, again, you're a busy professional, you actually work in the, doing stuff. So you may not be able to get to it in an expedient amount of time. And the worst thing about open source software, and I'll close with this. Worst thing about open source software, so many good projects get started by a single person. No one helps contribute to them. And then that person gets overwhelmed with real life and their work, and they can't keep it maintained. So, it's also a power thing too. Don't be afraid to have someone else work with you.
Hmm.
Just,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's such good advice. This is coming from someone who knows open source.
Yeah, so like I said, I think that covers everything. Is
got
there
it,
anything
Paul.
else that you wanted to talk about before you go? I know you got to leave here shortly, so.
No, I gotta take off right now, dude. It was so great chatting with you.
So great too, and let's do a hack session soon, and like maybe we'll do it over Periscope or something. Let's do something silly, or let's build a project or something. All right. And,
yeah, I'd be down to do more kind of like hack focus next time.
All right,
Like,
yeah, let's do that.
technical.
We'll just do it over Periscope and live stream, doing some desktop sharing and some hacking. Let's just do it. We'll have some
Sounds
beers
great,
while we do
man.
it. All right, man. Have a great night. Thank you again for joining us. Take care.
You too, man.
All right.
Send me the link to this. I don't even know where it's going to be posted. Or you're going to post it on Twitter.
It's already on Twitter. Yeah, just look. It's when you're mentioned, so you'll